This is Nick Mandarano with Tim Dierkes from MLBTradeRumors.com talking about this upcoming MLB offseason. Tim, big question about the Phillies. Cole Hamels is going to be eligible for arbitration this year after a long-term deal is ideal for both teams, or both sides rather. You know, like the Phillies and Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels is statistically similar to Jared Weaver, which is important in arbitration. I actually read that on MLBTradeRumors.com. Weaver just signed a 5-year, $85 million extension. What's the latest news on Hamels? What kind of money is he going to get?
Well, we haven't really heard much about momentum in long-term deal talks right now, but, you know, with the playoffs coming up, you really wouldn't expect that to be anybody's focus until after that. But, you know, we did an article today where we talked about a model that we've designed that looks at a player's statistics and projects his arbitration salary. And using that, Hamels projects to make $14 million next year. So I think if he were to pursue a long-term deal, I mean, it's tough. He's only a year away from free agency, so that can be tempting for a lot of guys. But if he wanted to pursue a long-term deal and stay with the Phillies, you know, he could give him a bit of a break on 2012 and take something like $12 million there. And then in terms of taking a Weaver-level discount, I mean, you know, it can be a template for some guys, but I don't really know if Hamels would want to play for $17 million a season when the free agent market could be offering him something like $23 to $25 million. You know, Weaver really wanted to stay where he was, and Hamels has talked about wanting to stay as well, but, you know, the difference is that when Hamels signed his current 3-year deal, he really didn't give the Phillies much of a price break. You know, it was as good for him as it was for them because he still had pretty high salaries despite, you know, being locked up through 3 arbitration years. So I'd be surprised if you know, less than $100 million got 6 years of Hamels. I wouldn't think that would get it done.
All right, there's another key pitcher on the Phillies that's coming up on a free agent possibility, Ryan Madson, the closer. His contract is also going to expire at the end of the season. Madson supposedly says he wants to finish his career in Philadelphia, but what do the Phillies need to do to make that happen?
I think they got to go to 3 years for sure. Not sure if they're going to want to do it, but in general terms, years has not really been a problem for the Phillies. So I can see them going there. You know, I think Boris is kind of going to jump into the offseason talking about a 4-year deal. You know, and there could be a team crazy enough to do it, but 3 might get it done, and I think if not at $10 million a year, then pretty close. You know, you look at somebody like Jose Valverde got 9, and Rafael Soriano got, I guess, almost 12. So Madsen should probably fit somewhere in there and maybe get around 10. And I mean, just with the Boris factor, those guys always seem to get, you know, a year more than you thought they would, or a couple $1 million more than you expected. I mean, Boris is the best agent at getting the player the maximum contract.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I do think Scott Boras is going to, you know, come into effect here this offseason. I don't really know what relievers are on the market this year. I haven't really gotten a chance to look at it. I'm actually trying to look at it right now. I know steering away from the Phillies, I know the record for a reliever's contract is something like $57 million. Do you see that being broken either this year or in the next couple of years with any of the upcoming free agents?
Just off the top of my head, and I could be wrong, but I think the record for a reliever is $47 million with Joe Nathan. Could be wrong.
Okay.
But I do think that teams, you know, as much as salaries kind of keep going up, and we see all this inflation, I do think teams are a lot more wary of that type of contract for a reliever than they were 4 or 5 years ago when they were giving out that and Francisco Cordero's deal. I think if Jonathan Papelbon had been a free agent 4 years ago with the same body of work that he has right now, you know, he might have gotten $60 million. But I think right now, you know, he's going to probably get something more along the lines of, I don't know, $39 million over 3 or something. I think teams are just cautious of the idea of a reliever, you know, making more than $10 million for more than 3 years. I mean, it's just a scary commitment. We've seen them go bust so often. I mean, you look at the Nathan, the Cordero, the B.J. Ryan contracts, and there's just so many ugly ones for people not named Mariano Rivera that I think teams are being more intelligent about the whole thing.
Now, coming back to the Phillies for a little bit, going to position players away from pitchers. Jimmy Rollins, their shortstop, hometown hero, is coming up on free agent deal as well. Some people are saying he's going to get in the 8-figure salary deal, like under $1 million. Some people are saying that's probable. I've also heard that Rollins isn't going to take less money to stay in Philly and would like to retire on the West Coast. Not really sure what's going on there. Can you clear this up? I mean, what are the chances Rollins comes back to Philly?
At this stage, there's not really much indication of what he plans to do. I haven't really heard a ton about him wanting to retire on the West Coast or anything like that, but I think he'd have opportunities for sure because he's not going to need Jose Reyes money, and there's always teams looking for a shortstop. The Giants obviously have a vacancy. I might put it at 50-50 right now until I see something that kind of tips the scales. I know the Phillies want to bring him back, and I guess the report was the Phillies wanted to do less years, but I think Rollins, he'd really be selling himself short to take anything less than 3 years, and he could possibly find 4 out there from somebody. A team like the Nationals could do it, and it depends on who's going to dive in and who gets Reyes and stuff like that. He's definitely going to have to be getting $10 million or more per year, though. I couldn't fathom him getting 8 or 9 or something like that. So I could see anywhere from probably 12 to 15. I mean, he's not quite the Rollins he once was, but shortstops are hard to come by. He still does his thing. He still plays good defense. And he's going to be hard to replace if they're not able to re-sign him.
Now, you mentioned Jose Reyes, and shortstops are hard to come by. Especially with that last statement, that might, up the bidding for Jose Reyes' deal this offseason. What have you heard about Reyes, and is it a safe thing to say that the Phillies would almost be okay with getting rid of Rollins because they know Jose Reyes is a possibility, or would that be, too far out there?
I'd say I don't think that that's really the way the Phillies are thinking because they have to know that there's certainly a lot of scenarios where they don't end up with either shortstop. If the Giants jump on Rollins quickly and the Mets re-sign Reyes before he hits the open market, and then you're going to be putting Jamie Carroll at shortstop or something like that, and it's probably not what they want to do. So, Reyes at one point when he was looking like the MVP of the National League, people were saying he probably does top Carl Crawford's contract. Then second half was pretty much marred by injuries, and then people are wondering, will he get even $100 million as opposed to $142? So I still think, kind of in the Adrian Beltre sense, that Reyes, he's a little bit less than a star player just because of that injury history, and he's still going to get $80 to $90 million bucks, and Rollins probably is going to get half that. So I think Rollins is very much more likely than Reyes for the Phillies, but the Phillies have certainly surprised us before and jumped in on guys that we didn't think they could afford. And, they could always clear some payroll by trading somebody.
Now, do you think the Mets are going to re-sign Reyes? Your opinion, is that going to happen?
Yeah, I would put them as the favorite right now. They can afford it. They know Reyes' health better than anybody. He has ties. He came up through the organization, and the injuries in a way kind of knock his price tag a little bit down to reality. So they would be my favorite for him. And it's kind of an interesting free agent market this winter because the typical big money players, Red Sox and Yankees, aren't really teams that people are anticipating going in for the 3 big position players. So a Reyes could be looking at something like the Giants and Nationals and Twins if he doesn't re-sign with the Mets. So it'd be a little, different than normal, But I guess there's always surprises every winter too.
Now you mentioned the Yankees and Red Sox. The Yankees always go out every year. They make a deal. Their payroll's much higher than anybody else's. That's pretty much what they're known for. They're known for, quote-unquote, buying their players, which a lot of people have a problem with. Some people think it's smart strategy. Do you have any indication on what the biggest signing for the Yankees is going to be this year, or do you think it's going to be more of a down year for New York?
Well, you can't look at their history and say that they always buy the biggest free agents. I think that offseason when they went out and got Sabathia, Teixeira, and Burnett all in one offseason kind of reinforced what people thought, but then the same token, a lot of people are ignoring, last offseason they didn't get Cliff Lee. They re-signed some of their own guys, and they really, most of their impact was made via minor league deals. And, a couple of years ago, one of their bigger moves were trading for Granderson and trading for Vasquez, and those are moves that any team could have made, and it wasn't really a payroll thing as much. So, I think the Yankees are going to look at all avenues, but starting pitching is going to have to be the focus. And it starts with Sabathia. Everybody expects him to opt out. Question is he going to re-sign, and is he going to do so quickly? And if not, they're going to have to look at C.J. Wilson as a bit of a backup plan, as well as, there's also the Yu Darvish situation where a lot of people think that he'll be posted by his club in Japan. So that's kind of a situation that I think is going to come to a head in November. So the Yankees might have to move quickly to see what they've got with CC before they can try to make a bid on Darvish.
Now, again, branching off that trade point you made about the Yankees trading, just this brings it to my mind. The Phillies, trading for Hunter Pence back in July, I guess. He's arbitration eligible after this year, so obviously he's not going anywhere but Philadelphia. Is he going to get signed up long term? I mean, it seems like he loves playing in Philadelphia. What kind of money is he going to be looking to get?
Yeah, it's kind of the assumption that everybody's making is that since the Phillies are pretty extension happy, that Pence can be penciled in for one. And I don't really have any reason to think that they won't go for that, especially because they can kind of do the bill me later option where they can knock off millions of dollars for this year and next that they would have had to pay through arbitration, and then kind of add those dollars towards the end of the contract and worry about it in 2015 or something. But Pence looks like he would be ready to get $11 million this winter as an arbitration eligible player, and then in theory 15 or something like that the following year. So just in arbitration you're looking at something like 26 for the next 2 years. So maybe you can do that for 20 or something like that, and then you got to figure out what he's worth, per free agent year, and you have to think, at least 15. And if this is going to be his last big contract, carry him through, 2 to 5 free agent years, then, you're probably getting into $100 million territory. It depends on what each side wants. Is Pence willing to just kind of delay free agency for 2 years and in a way take a middle ground and play it safe? I'm sure the Phillies would probably prefer that to, some kind of 7-year contract. So I don't really know what anybody's goals are with Pence, but I do think, he's going to be pretty expensive.
Now, one more quick question about the Phillies. Roy Oswalt, obviously, one of the 4 aces, was hurt for a good portion of this year, but he always pitches well. We're looking to see what he does in the playoffs. He pitches well in the playoffs. He's got a $16 million extension or a $2 million buyout, the Phillies option. What's going to happen there? And is there a possibility that they could maybe, buy out his contract and then bring him back for a lesser salary?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility, and, the best thing to do might be to work something out before that option decision comes up, as the Cardinals did with Chris Carpenter, but, most teams don't really want to start doing negotiating during the playoffs. So it's tricky. Once you put out the $2 million buyout, then you've already kind of put that out, whereas with Carpenter, they could just kind of override the option. The buyout became less of a factor. So, once you put out $2 million, which you pretty much have to no matter what. Then you got to say, well, what is he worth on perhaps a one-year deal? And I think he's worth somewhere in the $12 to $15 million range. That would be a big chunk of the free money that the Phillies have. So my guess is that he doesn't pitch for them in 2012. I could see Roy kind of going to Texas, probably the Rangers, something like that, for a year and $10 million, just kind of finishing things out on his terms. But people don't really know for sure. I mean, the focus is the playoffs, so we're all just speculating.
Two more quick points I want to bring up. I talked a lot about the Phillies, but I haven't talked much about the two biggest free agents coming into this offseason, in most people's opinion. We'll start with the second biggest, Prince Fielder. A lot of people are saying, no, he's not going back to Milwaukee. 95% chance he's going somewhere else. I've heard some rumors about him possibly playing for the Dodgers. What's going on there?
If I had to pick the Brewers or the field for Fielder, I would pick the field. But I think the Brewers are right in that mix. I mean, I think they set an attendance record this year. They offered him $100 million in the past, and he's done nothing really to decrease that value. So maybe they can scrape things together and go up to 130 or something, and maybe that's only 10 or 20 less than what another team is offering, and maybe he pulls the trigger. I mean, we always said that a Boras client wouldn't take a home team discount until Jared Weaver went and did it. I mean, Boras, in the end, hopefully he's only an advisor, and if Fielder really wants to stay, he can. On the other hand, Fielder said publicly that he's probably not coming back. So, he's pessimistic about returning. And it's interesting because the market for him doesn't have those typical names that you really see as huge players. So you're left to wonder, is it the Cubs, the Nationals, the Cardinals, if they can't re-sign Albert, Orioles, Blue Jays, Mariners, Rangers, Dodgers, even, people talking about the Marlins. So, it's going to be a different mix of teams for guys like Fielder and Pujols if they really start taking bids on the open market.
Now, I'm sorry. Can you give us a little bit of inside information, if you have any, on whether, being a DH or actually being a first baseman is really going to affect that?
Can't really give you, any kind of deep secrets into Prince's mind or whatever, but he was asked that question, and he certainly wouldn't. He said that he wouldn't rule out signing as a designated hitter, and I mean, that's the good business decision. You want to keep your options open and at least entertain the idea that the Yankees or Red Sox could be in the mix for his services, despite Adrian Gonzalez and Mark Teixeira. So, maybe Boras will be able to, bring them in as pseudo mystery team bidders. Maybe not, but I think Prince would at least look at it. But on the other hand, there is certainly a cautionary tale of Adam Dunn, a guy who didn't want a DH. Pat Burrell was that way too. They didn't really want a DH. That's where the money was, so they took it. They had really bad years, and you wonder if they would have stayed on the field, maybe they would have hit better by association. There's no way to really know it. But, Prince, by all accounts, is a gamer, plays hard. He's trying to be as good of a defensive first baseman as he can be. And if you reduce his entire role to 4 or 5 plate appearances a game, that might affect him. I think teams might be a little bit wary of that, and Prince might as well.
Now, last point I want to bring up, the biggest free agent coming into this offseason, Albert Pujols. A lot of people say he's played his last game in St. Louis. Other people say he'd be crazy to leave St. Louis. It's not going to happen. I'm one of those other people. I think, there's no way the Cardinals are going to let him go. But he's obviously going to be looking for huge money. I've heard, crazy rumors and crazy numbers on possible contracts for Albert Pujols. Do you have anything you can share with us about, that whole situation?
Well, up until recently, I was kind of in the same camp as you, that he couldn't really possibly leave the Cardinals. He's such a part of that franchise, the face of it. He's so ingrained, and it's just really hard to envision. It'd be like, Derek Jeter playing somewhere else. You just can't see it. That article from Joe Strauss, Cardinals beat writer, came out this weekend, said, the Cardinals aren't really inclined to, go beyond their current salary offer from the spring, which was, I think, $23 million a year over maybe 9 years. And, in a way, that's a very healthy offer just because of all those years. He's going to be the second player to get over $200 million with that. But on the other hand, you could certainly justify anywhere from the 25 to 30 million range for Pujols, and you could even talk about, the rare 10-year deal. So it only really takes one team to say, this is Albert. We think he's going to keep doing what he does for at least, 6 more years, and we'll take our chances with the other 3 or 4. And so it's a matter of how large the gap is going to be, because there's certainly going to be a gap. The Cardinals don't appear to be likely to be the high bidder for Albert, so we just have to see how much he's willing to leave on the table to stay.
Are there any possible favorites, assuming he doesn't go back to St. Louis? Are there any other teams that are looking like they have the best shot at getting Pujols?
There's kind of a belief that the Cubs, would be a factor there, but the Cubs are hard to figure out right now because we don't know who their general manager is, and we really don't know what their direction is. Their owner has talked a ton about player development. He talked about that a lot, when Jim Hendry was fired, and you do wonder if they could adopt a little mini rebuilding plan, but it's just hard to picture for a team that, draws through, so many fans, and the fans are coming, no matter how the team plays, or at least they're buying tickets. And it's really hard for me to envision them totally punting on 2012. So, you'd either like to see a team go for a total rebuild or kind of go for it all in. And, if they are to choose the all-in direction, they would have to be seen as a suitor for Pujols because they can definitely afford him.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about this, this whole free agent situation. Thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
All right, Nick Mandarano, Tim Dierkes from MLBTradeRumors.com.